Thanks for joining us today for this At the Desk session with a communication expert. Today, our very special, super special guest is Jock Cheetham. Great to have you with us, Jock.
Thanks, Antony.
Jock, you're the training editor at the Sydney Morning Herald here in Sydney. You have been a journalist for about 15 years. You were a chief sub-editor and a deputy international editor at Lloyd's List Daily Commercial News. That's a mouthful. And you are now responsible for recruiting and training journalists at the Herald. As well as you're a feature writer, you make films about humanitarian aid, and don't tell me you probably make a great cup of coffee too, right?
I do, actually. I really like to heat the milk.
Good man. What are the most important skills that you look for in journalists, either when you're recruiting them or when you're training them to improve their skills?
I think a passion for news is important in the news media. So, what's going on in the media, but also what's going on in the world. So, that comes back to curiosity. Yeah. Now, I think everybody would think, yeah, a journalist has to be curious, and it's true. But you also have to sort of know a lot as a result of that curiosity. I would like people to be able to write, but we can train that a bit. But that is a crucial skill. And also spell. We probably can't train that if school hasn't managed to do it. So, if you read a lot and write a lot and you're really engaged with the world and actually engaging as a person too, if you've got a personality that would reach out to people and make them want to give you a story or want to tell you their story, that's going to really help as a journalist, and we do look for that kind of thing.
Jock, what about the speeding up of the news cycle? We used to talk, the deadlines are obviously different to what they used to be, and you have all sorts of different considerations that come into play now around that because the news is just there and it's available, and it's this 24 hours. Sometimes we hear it referred to as a news cyclone. What's been the effect of that on reporting and on the quality of news? Have there been any effect?
Well, yes and no. Let me explain that. I saw a film on the ABC which was made in 1937, and it was about an American newspaper that was afraid of the radio bringing news immediately and breaking news to the audience quicker than a newspaper could. Of course, that is true. It is quicker. Now, that is the same fear that we're living with now, in a sense, that the internet undermines, say, for example, the need for a newspaper because you have to wait for it. But, newspapers didn't die 80 years ago. They're not dead now. No. So there's always been a demand for news quickly. So I don't think it's necessarily new. Or even take CNN, which must have launched sort of well over 20 years ago now. Yeah. That was a sort of 24-hour news cycle. That's been going on for a long time. That was pre-internet. So there's a lot of examples of the way that this isn't new. But, there is no doubt a lot more supply now. There's people from all over the world blogging and that kind of thing. The effect of that, I suppose, apart from the competition effect, which is probably a good thing in some ways, the resourcing effect of the loss of revenue means that things are a bit tighter. There's probably a faster turnaround, but in general in the media there's probably a little bit less checking. As those resources mean there's a slightly diminished staffing in various news outlets. And so that probably, in a nutshell, means there's a little bit more journalism, which is, kind of a little bit more opportunities for powerful interests or people who can afford press relations and press releases and so on, like that, to get their message through, with somewhat less of a challenge from journalists trying to critically analyse it. That's not to say that there aren't still journalists critically analysing. There are, but I think there's some more journalism.
We saw with radio, just to take that example, it pops into my mind, following what you've just said, that AM stations turned into talk talk radio in large part once FM came along because they owned the high fidelity music. What's happening with newspapers? Do you think newspapers as a distribution mechanism for news, I mean, some people say they're going to be extinct in 10, 20 years. Do you see that happening, one? Or two, how do you see newspapers changing to fit the new world?
Yeah, there's a few different thoughts on that. I mean, I think there will be further rationalisation of newspapers. There's still 2 national dailies in Australia, and there's still 2 local dailies in Sydney, Sydney Morning Herald and the Daily Telegraph. So there's room for rationalisation there while still having newspapers.
Is that a worry?
So I think we will see fewer newspapers. But whether we see their extinction, I think I will steer clear of crystal ball gazing. And how will they change? A lot of people say they'll need to have more analysis. That's what they're going to be providing as a distinction from, you know, the immediate news of the internet.
Yep.
Now, I don't think that that's going to happen as much as some people do, because a newspaper still needs to provide news and break news.
Yes.
Maybe what they'll do is move towards more exclusive news that they're breaking that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of sort of distinctive service that they're providing to their readers that's going to be the core of their brands if they're to survive.
A few weeks ago, Jock, we saw one of the major papers here put up a paywall. At the same time, on that very weekend, I went and had a look, and I just saw all these terrible, obvious spelling mistakes in the headlines, and I thought, what's happened? They've killed the sub-editors. They then seemed to fix that up, so hopefully that's not going to go with the territory. What do you think about the paywall? I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it inevitable?
Well, I think it's a good thing, and it's good that Rupert Murdoch is doing the experimenting with it, because, you know, if it blows up in his face, then good luck to him. I think, you know, it might actually work. I think it needs a big player like News Corporation to take the first step, because that provides a bit of cover for smaller media companies to do the same.
Yep.
The more media companies that put their content behind either a paywall or some version of needing people to register or what have you, so that it's not just simply free at one click. The more media companies that do that, then the less free content there is around for various other people to take advantage of, if you like.
Yep.
And that's the, you know, whether that's the Huffington Posts or other aggregators who get this free content, or whether it's Google or whoever you see as the villain in this situation, the more that the media companies decide that they are going to value their content as a sort of industry, I suppose, the more successful I think that will be. And so the fact that it started is probably a good thing.